and welcome everybody to the Robert Ferguson Observatory Speaker Series. My name is Stephanie DeRomelar. I'm the Executive Director of the Observatory, and we're so excited to have Ned Kahn with us here today presenting for us, and I will introduce him in a second. But before we start, just wanted to remind everybody to please keep yourselves muted to minimize that background noise until we open up for questions at the end, possibly throughout. Feel free to put questions in the chat as you think of them, and I'll facilitate that and either interrupt Ned kind of while he's talking, or we'll wait till the end. So either way. Like I said, I see some familiar faces and names and some new names. So just for those of you who don't know about the Robert Ferguson Observatory, we are run by the Valley of the Moon Observatory Association, which is a 501(c) nonprofit comprised of volunteer, amateur, and professional astronomers. And we've fulfilled our mission of offering educational programs about science and astronomy for students, the public, and in support of educators for about over 25, I think it's about 27 years now. The observatory is almost all volunteer run and typically serves about 9,000 visitors annually. We are located in beautiful Sugarloaf Ridge State Park. So if you haven't come to visit us and you're local, please stop by at our next public star party, actually this Saturday. The observatory houses a 40-inch reflector telescope, which is the largest telescope in Northern California that's accessible to the public, a robotic 20-inch research grade or CCD telescope, and an 8-inch 2-meter-long refractor telescope. We have a really robust volunteer program. Like I said, all of our program development delivery is done by docents. So if any of you have an interest in volunteering for us and learning how to use these amazing telescopes, we definitely invite you to fill out an application on our website, rfo.org. We also have a membership program is another great way to support the observatory while getting some member benefits, like free admission to our public star party being one of them. And then lastly, just wanted to mention that we've kept the presentations in our speaker series free to the public to align with our mission of offering educational-based astronomy programs to our community. That being said, if anyone is so inspired to donate to the Robert Ferguson Observatory to ensure that we can continue to fulfill that mission, you can also do that through our website, which is www.rfo.org. So to introduce Ned, Ned Kahn is a California artist who combines science, art, and technology in ways that allow viewers to witness and participate in the interplay of natural elements such as water, wind, sand, and fire. Through modeling and marshaling these forces of nature, he recreates vast environmental phenomenon on a human scale. Oops, sorry, still letting people in. Through his work, we can observe the behavior of exquisitely complex systems such as tornadoes, avalanches, whirlpools, and windstorms, and better appreciate their beauty, appreciate their beauty and intricacy. But Kahn artworks also reach beyond the terrestrial. They give us a window onto universal forces, allowing us to better understand patterns that appear throughout the cosmos, from the bands of storms swirling across Jupiter to the forces that shape spiral galaxies. Ned Kahn received a degree in botany and environmental studies from the University of Connecticut, and soon after, as artist in residence, Kahn designed exhibits for the San Francisco's beloved Exploratorium until 1996. And while there, he became a protege of the museum's founder, Dr. Frank Oppenheimer, who Kahn counts as one of his greatest inspirations. After leaving the Exploratorium, Kahn moved to Grayton, right here in Sonoma County, and founded Ned Kahn Studios in Sebastopol. His work often integrates the forces of water and wind using urban buildings, piers, playgrounds, airports, and even parking garages as canvases. His work appears in public spaces across the United States and around the world, with permanent installations in Australia, Singapore, England, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. In 2003, Kahn was awarded a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. So without further ado, Ned, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I brought some videos of kind of previous projects to show you, and then I'll segue into some things that I'm working on now, and some projects that relate to space and the observation of the Earth from space. And so I thought I'd start with this project that a lot of people around here know. This is in Santa Rosa, 3rd Street, where you enter kind of the city, kind of going underneath the shopping mall. Yeah, so this was a public art project from the city of Santa Rosa. So it's, I forget, 30,000 hinged aluminum elements that move in the wind. And so this and a number of the other projects I'm going to show you, the intent was to show people how interesting the wind really is. And so here you're just seeing, one little slice of it. It's just how the wind is kind of hitting this facade of this building. But you can imagine like this whole volume of air that you're seeing also has this same really interesting patterns in it. And there's amazing order in the wind. There's amazing waves and structures and vortices, and it's just wonderfully variable and interesting. And so working on this project and some of the other ones that I'll show you, I just got intrigued with this idea that so much of the conversation around global warming is, fear-based, just makes people anxious. And so people just, change the channel. And I've had this kind of half-baked thought, this hope really, that if you could show people how beautiful and interesting the wind really is, that maybe kind of in a sensory way, instead of, trying to appeal to their thinking minds, to appeal to kind of deeper sensory intelligence, to kind of help people like shift their relationship with the atmosphere, instead of thinking about it as a place where, it's just vast and you could dump all your, carbon and other junk into it, to just think about how exquisite it really is, and how unlikely it is that we're on this sphere of rock and space, and we're surrounded by this incredibly thin membrane of aliveness. And so all these artworks kind of have that intent behind them. This is another local project. This is on the roof of the art museum in Santa Rosa. The erratic fence is its name. It is a little bit of a play on Christo and Jean-Claude's running fence. So there's a series of counterbalanced aluminum panels that respond to the wind individually, but they also affect each other. And so you can kind of see how a gust of wind kind of gets translated into the motion of these. They're essentially pendulums. They're weighted at the bottom, so they return to a vertical position. They bounce light onto the facade of the building. This was up for many years. It's currently, we took it down because they're doing some repair work on the roof of the museum, but it will hopefully return. This is a piece that was temporarily installed in a vacant lot in Sebastopol, where there's going to be a hotel one of these days. And so this is kind of a hammock form, kind of a horizontal version of the piece that's on the building in Santa Rosa. So a cable net system with thousands of again hinged elements, kind of revealing what the air currents look like. This is actually this was a prototype for a much larger work that we're currently fabricating for a train station in Paris. It'll be installed about a year from now. It'll be the largest artwork in Paris. It's basically this times about 10. And so, a lot of my projects are, public art projects, interfaces with buildings and architects. This is a shade structure for a hospital in San Antonio. They needed some way of kind of mitigating the harsh sunlight coming into. These are all the waiting rooms of the hospital, and so I designed this. They're perforated aluminum panels on hinges that move in the wind, and they have a slow, almost underwater like movement to them, and but this is unaltered video. This is really kind of what the wind looks like. So again, it's being driven by the air currents, all the forms and textures and vortices that are immersed in the wind, but also the artwork itself, which is a little bit like a very crude scientific detector. It's a little bit like what's in a telescope, kind of the detector that actually like takes the light that's coming through the telescope and records it or turns it into data. So here, you have a bunch of very simple mechanical elements that are responding to this invisible flow patterns in this substance that we're all breathing right now, and making it visible. And in the context of a hospital, the idea was to kind of create this to block the harsh sunlight, but also create kind of
that out of there.
soothing pattern of
I can't
motion
remember
and
either.
movement.
I don't know.
This is a recent project, just finished for a super ugly building. This is the stadium for the Phoenix Suns, the basketball team. And this really horrible building, the city wanted the owner to tear it down. He didn't want to spend the money. Basically, I was the plan B. We covered this whole building with these moving panels. So these are all moving in the wind. These are, revealing the air currents, but the panels have a special coating on it that changes the luminosity of the color depending on the angle that the wind tilts the panels and how they interact with the light that's hitting them. And the intent was to kind of mimic kind of the hues of fire, being the Phoenix Suns. And there's another team that plays in this arena that also has a fire symbol in their name. And so, when the scale of architecture, air currents become really interesting. And on this project, some of the kinetic moving elements got installed over a solid building structure, but a lot of them got installed over parking areas that were permeable to the wind. So I might go forward a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So you start to see the air currents coming through the building and bouncing off of the more solid parts of the building. And so this whole artwork becomes like a scientific detector, revealing kind of how this building is interacting with the atmosphere of the Earth. And a big part of my interest in kind of facades like this is, so much of architecture, like the line between the building and the environment is just, it's like the glass or the steel of the building ends and then the atmosphere begins. And I've been intrigued with blurring that line, like making it unclear where the building ends and where the atmosphere begins, like kind of almost like mixing of those two. And then this is a sort of nearby project. This was in Dublin, California, the headquarters for Zeiss, the lens maker. This is their kind of new kind of research and development laboratory in Dublin. And so this artwork is, basically sits over a reflecting pool. The reflecting pool is part of a whole water rain capture reclamation system for the whole site. And the artwork kind of helps shade the water and, kind of, keep the algae from growing in it. But basically it becomes a field, almost like a field of grasses that's bending in the wind, which was my original inspiration for this whole line of inquiry. I was an artist in residence at the Marin Headlands, at the Art Center at the Marin Headlands, and I was out wandering around one of the fields right around this time of year, and where the grasses are really tall and soft, and the army was out there working on some drill, and they were hovering over this field with a helicopter, and the wind from the helicopter was creating this exquisite kind of changing mandala of air currents on this field, and it just gave me this inkling that I wanted to start creating artworks that had something of that changeability and interest to them. And again, kind of relating it back to detectors and telescopes and scientific instruments. I mean, I sort of view these things as a very crude instrument in a way. It's a bunch of neutral elements that are individually responding to nature and kind of making larger scale kind of flow patterns visible. And yeah, moving on to we've done some huge versions of this, same idea. This is a project in Singapore where we covered 4 acres of surface area with a cable net structure, again, with thousands of kind of hinged elements moving in the wind. This is looking out through the lobby of it's 3 huge hotel towers, and this is the lobby that connects them. In the same project, so this was a multi-billion-dollar development in Singapore, and they had to. A lot of these projects, they have to spend a certain percentage of their budget on art. So they had this huge art budget, and so we did this huge artwork that functions as a shade for this lobby. But then we also did this large water feature, which is a huge vortex. Collects rain. It stores the rain. It actually, there's a hole it's a huge acrylic bowl. It's 70 feet in diameter, 4-inch thick acrylic. And so rainwater gets captured in this, it gets pumped back up through these nozzles that impart rotation into the vortex. And one of the reasons I included this in this presentation is while I was working on this in Singapore, an astrophysicist, I never got the guy's name, a Singapore astrophysicist, leaned over the railing and started telling me about how his specialty was how binary stars form. And the vortex, we deliberately, and you can see in this image, the drain is not centered in the center of the vortex. It's slightly off center. And doing that causes the vortex to orbit around, causes the water to orbit around the drain instead of being centered on it. It makes it much more interesting. But as it's draining, there's a certain moment where one vortex kind of spawns 2 vortices and they orbit around each other. And this astrophysicist got all excited because, he had been working for decades on kind of the mathematics of how a collapsing cloud of gas forms a vortex. And if it's not perfectly symmetrical, it can destabilize and turn into 2 orbiting vortices, which ultimately coalesce into 2 orbiting stars and sometimes 3. And so it was a rare moment where, I was able to kind of give a little bit back to science instead of kind of absorbing inspiration from science. This is a project in Columbus, Ohio, another public art project for a super ugly parking structure, which unfortunately is, keeps coming back as I've become kind of the parking garage artist. So we covered this super ugly parking garage with these curtains. It's a polycarbonate, it's a plastic chainmail. So very similar to the chainmail that medieval knights covered themselves with, except super lightweight, super strong. And when you hang it just from the top, the wind naturally creates these patterns in it. And it's very much a mechanical analogy for what happens with wind over water. Because all these rings of the chainmail can kind of move relative to each other, the fabric has the ability to expand, even though it's not stretchy. It can grow, and so these waves naturally spontaneously arise. This is looking up at it, and so when we were working on this project. Totally out of the blue, I got a call from an administrator working for the International Space Station, Mickey Sode. So Mickey was in charge of kind of outreach and scientific education for the space station. And she told me that they had some funding to do something bold and ambitious, and they got the idea to get an artist involved. And so she said, give us a proposal of something cool to do on the space station. So like an amazing opportunity. And so I'd been experimenting with this fabric. And so I built a version of it that was a disc, and we spun it. This is hanging from my forklift. And so when you spin a big disc of the same chainmail fabric, it develops these really interesting wave structures in it. And so I started thinking about like how most galaxies are kind of flat spinning disks or spiral galaxies like the one we live in. And that the early solar system was probably a flat spinning disk. And just, a lot of places where you look into, you see spinning disks. And so I went back to the space station with this proposal. And so the idea was to take actually this disc of polycarbonate chainmail, attach it to the Canada arm of the space station, which has the ability to spin things and also, move in, almost an infinite number of ways. And so I presented this to, some of the science education people at the space station, and they got all excited. They were like, wow, this is an amazing idea. We had no idea that you were going to give us something so challenging, but, we're not the decision makers here. We have to, connect you with all the people who actually make the decisions around here, all the people who deal with the safety and the day-to-day, engineering of the space station. So they set up a Zoom meeting. And it was one of the more disastrous Zoom meetings of my life. So, there I was, it was a bunch of little, faces like we're all looking at now, except it was all like the people in charge of the Jet Propulsion Lab and people in charge of the whole space station and the maintenance and there was an astronaut there. And so I started presenting this idea. And I got about halfway into my presentation and they stopped me and they basically said, no way, dude. And they basically said the space station is actually amazingly fragile at this, it's many years past how long it was supposed to last. And it's basically like kind of limping along. And so one of the engineers was like, if one little ring of this thing comes loose and hits one solar panel and takes it out, there's not enough power to keep everyone alive, and all the people who are on the space station die. And if you break the Canada arm, then there's no way we can get people on or off, and everyone dies. And he had like all these scenarios that all ended with, and everyone dies. And so finally I said, look, I'm a Buddhist. I don't like killing insects. I really don't like killing a bunch of, astronauts in a super public way. And someone else said, well, you'd get really famous as the artist who destroyed the space station. And I'm like, no, that's not one of my goals. So they basically read me the riot act, but there was one voice who was a supporter, and it was a former astronaut. Her name's Nicole Stopp. And Nicole and I have become friends after this. And she's a wonderful, amazing person. And so she basically said, well, just do something smaller and do it, inside the space station. And then, we don't have to worry about killing anyone. And so they sent me back to the drawing board, and it resulted in getting a ride on the infamous Vomit Comet. All right, so this is Todd, my trusty assistant of many decades. I was going to go, but actually I hurt my back. So Todd got the privilege of going on the Vomit Comet. And so basically we brought a bunch of different little experiments to try. And so one of my ideas was, you've seen astronauts kind of play with like drops of water in zero gravity, but I wanted to see like what a whole bunch of water would look like in zero gravity. And then they had all these limits with the weight, so we weren't able to take, I wanted to take like a giant, sphere of water and kind of see what it would do. This is a sphere with a little tiny stainless steel balls in it. And so in zero gravity, it becomes a cloud. So here it is, with gravity. So for those of you who don't know, the Vomit Comet, the 0G is its real name. It goes up and down. So basically you get like double gravity while it's climbing, and then you get zero gravity. You only get it for like 20 seconds or something like that. And so these were some versions of this idea of the spinning disk in zero gravity, kind of, trying to mimic or show people kind of how complicated a spinning disk, an elastic spinning disk is in zero gravity. And so, well, you can probably tell Todd had a great time doing all these experiments. And so there were a couple other experiments happening on the airplane while we were doing this, and they were all these very serious things. And so this is like the whole staff of the plane. They all came to watch Todd play with all these little toys that we had made. This is another version of a very super lightweight fabric, stretchy. And so you see kind of the waves that appear in the fabric while you're spinning it. So those are very much like a mechanical analogy to the arms of a spiral galaxy. When you look at a spiral galaxy, you can see that the stars kind of clump in these spirals, and it's very much related to the whole dynamics of a spinning disk. So if you can imagine, we're in a spinning disk of stars, in the center, instead of it being Todd spinning this thing, it's, a crazy huge black hole that's also rotating and imparting some of its rotational, torsion into the whole galaxy. And so anyway, we had a great time. And like some of the other scientists who are like right behind Todd, you just see it a little bit. There were these scientists studying, trying to figure out how you could stitch up a wound in zero gravity. And apparently in all the decades of space travel, no one's ever really hurt themselves. They needed stitches. And so these guys were like, they had like a fake arm with like fake blood in it. And like in these 20-second intervals of zero gravity, they're like trying to like stop the blood flow inside this, box. And here's Todd, playing with, spinning things. And so, I'll fast forward. This goes on for a while. We, basically it was a whole day of trying things and different, water experiments and little metal balls. But the last one, last thing we tried was we had a really long slinky, and we welded the ends of it together to form a toroid. And this thing was so much fun. And they made us like tie a string around it. They were afraid it would get away and hurt someone. And so its movement is much more interesting without the string tied to it. But and I have no idea what the importance of this is in any kind of scientific analogy, but it was like a super fun thing. And so we do all these experiments, and then we go back to the ISS and say, okay, here's the video, like, which one of these? And then they said, well, actually, the funding just got cut for this whole project. So thanks for all your work. And so that vanished like light going into a black hole. And so then I felt kind of, defeated. And but then totally out of the blue, another call out of the blue from an engineer working for a company called Momentus. Momentus launches satellites, mostly commercial satellites, but some scientific experiments. So they have this beautiful, amazing craft that they shoot up on a SpaceX rocket once or twice a year. And this thing has little compartments for all these mini satellites, and they fly around the Earth releasing all these satellites. After they're done, there's new rules, like you can't leave your junk in space anymore. So they have to fly this craft back into the atmosphere and burn it up when they're done. And they've spent like crazy tens of millions of dollars on this amazing machine. And so they came to me and they were like, give us some ideas of something else cool we can do with this thing before we have to burn it up. And having thought about space, and I thought, okay, well, these guys want to let me have control over, or give them an idea for this amazing rocket that has an amazing camera on it. And so I said, you know, all these years I've been working on these kind of atmospheric visualization things, but what I really want to do is show people how thin the atmosphere of the Earth really is, because people have a really wrong idea about it. I mean, you look up at the sky and clouds seem like they're way up there, and planes seem like they're even farther up there, and it just seems like the atmosphere is vast and inexhaustible. But when you see it from space, it's insanely thin. It's like a membrane. And so from the space station, there's a million photographs of, you know, kind of sections where you can see the glow of the atmosphere. So I said, can you take this craft and you could fly it away from the Earth as far as you can, leaving yourself enough fuel to get back so you can burn it up when you're done, and shoot a video and take some pictures, center the craft exactly in the center of the shadow of the Earth, and get an image of just the thinness of the atmosphere backlit by the sun. And so bizarrely, is from all my research in the whole history of all the space missions, no one's ever really taken this picture. These are the two closest things. Apollo 11 took a photograph of like half of the limb of the sun, with the sun's kind of setting behind the Earth. A Japanese moon mission almost got the picture. And but neither of these projects, these were just sort of like incidental thing. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time and took these pictures. And so Momentus got excited about the idea. Actually, that's not true. Initially, they were very skeptical. Initially, they said, well, we don't think you're going to be able to see anything. And I said, why not? And I said, well, you know, you're too close. You know, in order to really see the full luminosity, you got to be like way far away. You got to be like 36,000 kilometers away from the Earth. And, you know, all these satellites get launched, you know, like, you know, 200 miles, 200 kilometers or 300 kilometers, you know, and so they were like, we can't go that far. And so I bounced the idea by Nicole Stott, my astronaut friend. She connected me with another astronaut friend of hers, Don Pettit. So Don Pettit, he's a current NASA astronaut, and he's become like this amazing artist. He is an amazing photographer. And so this is a time-lapse image that he took from the space station. He's told me he's taken 500,000 photographs from the space station of the Earth. And so the glowing band that you see is a phenomena called Earth glow. And it's actually the upper atmosphere. It's like basically where the atmosphere of the Earth kind of segues into space. It gets charged up by, you know, the super potent UV from the sun, breaks the oxygen and the nitrogen molecules into their elemental, you know, instead of it being O2, it's, you know, 2 elemental oxygens. Instead of N2, it's, you know, 2 elemental nitrogens. And then at night, they recombine and they emit a photon. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing kind of the glow of the upper atmosphere of the Earth. And so I met with Don Pettit and I told him, you know, that the Momentus people are dubious that there's anything to see. And he said, they're wrong. You know, I've spent a year on the space station and it's beautiful. And so he encouraged me, and I went back to Momentus and convinced them. So this is a photograph that Don Pettit took from the space station, where he was trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do. And so he took a fisheye lens. You know, the space station is way too close to see the whole Earth, but with a fisheye lens, and he had to get all the way back at like the other end. So this is the cupola window that he's shooting through. And so you get an inkling of what the glow of the full ring of the glow of the atmosphere will look like. And so I asked him, like, Don, like, the next time they send you up there, can you take this picture for me? And he said, well, in order to make it really amazing, I'd have to go for a spacewalk. And And he's like, they don't let me do that, unless there's really a need, because it's kind of dangerous. And I said, yeah, right, I really don't want to be known as the artist who killed Don Pettit. So then I said, Momentus has this amazing camera. And he said, that's a much safer way to do it. No one's going to die. All right. So this is just sort of my artistic idea of what this image is going to look like. And but we really have no idea. It's really like a scientific endeavor. And so they've launched this craft. They're releasing their satellites right now. They've got like another month or two of satellite releasing, and they have a scientific experiment that they have to finish. And when they're done with all that, Momentus told me that they have a commercial mission, which is launching these commercial satellites. Then they have a science mission, and then they have an art mission, and this is the art mission. And so the art mission will probably start, sometime, later this spring or this summer. They're going to fly this thing into the shadow of the Earth, and we're going to see what the whole luminosity of the atmosphere really looks like. And as I got into researching this, one of the fascinating things I discovered was that what you're really seeing is the breaking apart of oxygen and nitrogen and the recombining of those. Both those are produced by life. All the oxygen on this planet, came from plants and cyanobacteria and other photosynthesizing microbes. All the nitrogen, gets channeled through living systems. And if there was no life on the Earth, the nitrogen would slowly go away, and I forget, certain number of tens of thousands of years, all the nitrogen would be gone. So this beautiful glowing halo around the Earth is actually a signature of life. If there was no life on the Earth, you wouldn't have this. And so it makes it super special to capture this image. And so hopefully sometime this year we'll see what the real thing looks like. And then this is just a simulation of what it might look like. And so the idea is we'll be able to have kind of a whole time-lapse movie of the passage of the craft kind of into the shadow. And one of the great unknowns about this project is how much all the city lights of humans is going to drown out the luminosity of the atmosphere. And so I have Momentus talked into the idea of waiting until the Earth is centered over the Pacific Ocean, which is the darkest view of the planet, and seeing if that does what we want it to do. And then, just with the couple minutes I have left, I'll show you a couple other projects I'm working on right now that all relate to, again, kind of giving people this sensory understanding of the thinness of the air. This is a project in Saudi Arabia. It's a giant dome. It's actually in a super high-end tacky a retail hub of a project that's getting built right now in Riyadh, the capital. And so this dome is about 100 feet in diameter. And the idea is that above the dome, we're creating a whole air vortex. And the skin of the dome is going to be about 1 million tiny pendulums that are going to move in the wind. And basically, and the length of the pendulums relative to the diameter of the dome roughly matches, excuse me, the breathable layer of the Earth's atmosphere. So in this tacky mall, there'll be this one sort of cosmic place where you'll be able to kind of see the thinness of the atmosphere, and also kind of the how dynamic and beautiful it is. And then the last thing I'll show you, this is another project in Saudi Arabia. This is a development on the west coast of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has all these crazy mega cities under construction. This is one called Alula. And they wanted to have a planetarium, but they didn't want it to be like a normal planetarium. They wanted it to be really different. And so they dumped it in my lap. I designed the whole building structure. It's basically like 2 sand dunes kind of surrounding the sphere. And the idea is that the sphere the surface of the sphere will have thousands of wind animated elements on it that again will match the thickness of the breathable depth of the atmosphere, but will be moving in the wind and kind of creating this kind of fluid representation of the dynamic churning and aliveness of the Earth's atmosphere. But then you'll be able to enter inside of it. And when you walk inside, the whole interior of the sphere is going to be a super high resolution LED, a spherical LED projection screen. And we're going to project real-time satellite imagery of the clouds all over the whole Earth. So there'll be a bridge where you'll be able to walk in and kind of stand in the center of this, and completely around you, you'll see the atmosphere of the Earth. So almost like you were standing in the center of the Earth and the Earth was perfectly clear. And again, the idea kind of similar to the space project, letting people see the entirety of it. Like we never get to see that view, all the satellite imagery, it's always, it's always half of the sphere of the Earth. So what would it do to someone's kind of comprehension and understanding of how beautiful and interesting the Earth is if you could take it all in one experience? All right, so maybe with that, I'll open it up to questions or comments that people have.
Wow, that was amazing. The one bad thing with Zoom is that you can't hear all the gasps of amazement and stuff that I was doing the whole time. And I think other people were too, because, some people wrote in the chat, wow, and amazing. So, it's so quiet, so you don't hear our responses, but it's like so amazing. Let's see, okay. So very important question. Somebody asked if Todd vomited on the vomit comment.
No, he didn't. And he had a great time. And he described the experience as addictive. He was like, when can I go back? And I've heard that from some of the astronauts that I've gotten to know. Like some people can't hang with the nausea of it. And some people, they're just nauseous for a little bit and it goes away. And some people, it never goes away. But Todd had a great time. And he said all the aches and pains of his back and, all just went away instantly. But then, it's only 15 seconds or, then it all comes back and then it's double gravity and everyone's kind of lying on the ground getting, squished but no, Todd had a great time.
Wow.
I was very jealous.
And somebody asked too, where is that? Where is that located?
Which one?
The comet vomit or vomit comet, or I forget what you called it, but
they have two of them. One takes off from somewhere in California, Southern California. The other one takes off from Florida, down where all the kind of NASA stuff is in Florida. So yeah. Todd had to endure a Florida trip, but he got to be weightless.
Wow, amazing. Let's see, somebody asked, and I'm sorry, it wasn't really conducive to interrupt you. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were presenting, but somebody asked, it was during the time when you were showing your original project for NASA, the large, circular kind of chainmail thing that was attached to the ISS. Somebody asked, what about the solar wind? Wouldn't that also push your chainmail art form?
Yeah, the solar wind would definitely have an effect, and that was kind of going to be kind of part of it. And also, just learning about the harshness of the sun in space. I mean, it really gives you an appreciation for how much the atmosphere of the Earth protects us from this constant nuclear explosion that is the sun, and so plastics in space degenerate really quickly. And so that was one of the worries that they had. And among, many others, obviously.
That's one thing that was striking to me, even on the, the earthbound pieces of art that capture the wind, how little wind is required to really see the movement of the wind. I think it might have been the video you showed from the Phoenix Suns building. And I was watching, you know, the trees in front were hardly moving. You hardly saw a breeze, but it was so, you know, that was really amazing how you see all these currents when you don't even notice that they're there.
Yeah, well, and we're constantly developing new variations on the theme. And yeah, if you drive by my workshop, I'm right on Highway 116, right near the turn to Grayton. My gate is a new system that we've developed that's like way more sensitive than any of the other ones we developed. It's every element is counterweighted, so it's almost kind of neutrally buoyant in the atmosphere, and then the slightest breezes get revealed in the movement of it. And so yeah, I mean it's a problem that a lot of scientists face. You know, when you're building an instrument to measure something in nature, like you want to know that you're really getting nature's response instead of a response that's kind of mixed with the nature of your detector. And so, but you can never really completely extract the detector from it. And so these various different systems we've developed, you know, some it's mostly the wind and a little bit of the detector, and some it's a lot of the detector and a little bit of the wind. And so it's an interesting you know, balance.
Very cool. And by the way, to everybody, feel free if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you're afraid to talk over somebody, you can do the little raise hand thing and I can, you know, unmute you. So feel free to do that. I thought that was funny. Somebody said, I never had an interest in going to Saudi Arabia until now. Oh my God, really want to see this. And I think they were referring to the planetarium that looked like something in a futuristic movie or Star Wars or something. That was so cool.
Well, Saudi Arabia is an interesting country. I mean, you know, I had some interactions, not directly, mercifully, with the Crown Prince, who is obviously a dark figure. But he, you know, to his credit, wants to make Saudi Arabia into a modern country, and he wants to wean the country from fossil fuels. And so there's, you know, a huge interest in sustainable technology there, creating sustainable cities, and yeah, they're doing it all with, you know, oil money. So it's hard to really, you know, justify it. But Saudi Arabia is kind of waking up from hundreds of years of kind of I don't know, a dark sleep. And so I have thoroughly enjoyed my time there. People have been super nice to me. And yeah, there's some, yeah, and there's a few other projects I'm working on there that are, you know, of a huge scale. There, I've been involved in the creation of, it's going to be the largest field of power generating wind turbines on the planet. It's part of a new city that's being developed called Neom, also on the west coast of Saudi Arabia. And so just square miles of wind turbines, and it's super windy there. And when they presented this huge field of wind turbines to the Crown Prince MBS, he said, well, it has to be more than this. Like, I want it to be, and he used the phrase, a Christo scale artwork. And so he had them actually get in touch with me, and I gave him a whole proposal, and you know, I'd say 50-50 chance that it actually comes together. But I proposed to take all these enormous wind turbines and basically attach a tail to them with a triangular sheet of the polycarbonate chainmail that does beautiful things in the wind. So it wouldn't affect the power generating of the turbines, but it would turn them into a visualization of what the wind is doing in this space. And so it would be a massive scale artwork. And so that's, you know, kind of in the mix there.
And I mean, how long do some of these projects take? Like this planetarium one,
Years.
You know, what was the...
Yeah, sometimes many years. And yeah, and it's a challenge for an artist. I was just hanging out with a painter friend of mine today, and you know, he gets an idea in his head and he starts painting, and he knows within, you know, hours or days whether it was a good idea or not. Some of these projects, you know, my projects, you know, it's many years before you get the feedback of whether your idea was a good one or a bad one. And so like, it's a lot of building prototypes, a lot of testing things, a lot of experimenting, to try to convince myself first, that it's a good idea. Then, convincing a bunch of other people to spend like a whole bunch of money on something that no one's ever done before. And
Wow.
Hey, could I ask, since you're talking about that, just how much, it sounds like maybe you don't do much simulation or modeling ahead of time. You kind of get a general idea and then wait and see what the big scaled item looks like, or, I mean.
Yeah, I'm like, people are often shocked at how low tech I am. I mean, we build a lot of, paper models and cardboard models, and then, small versions, and we test them, and we clamp things to the back of the pickup truck and drive them, very fast on roads where we hope that there's no police, and see what they do. And so we do a lot of, very physical testing. A couple of the people who work for me are way smarter than I am and can actually do some computer simulations of things. And so, I've relied on them greatly over the years too.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Oops, sorry, it was a bunch of comments. Oh, somebody said, are the installation elements quiet as they move, or is there some kind of sound with the movement?
Well, it's funny that you ask, because I just wrote a long email on this exact topic. We just proposed a tree-like structure for a plaza in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is one of the Arab Emirates, and Abu Dhabi is a super interesting country. And right next to the airport in Abu Dhabi, they're building it's actually like half done already, a city, Masdar city. Masdar is supposedly going to be the first city on the planet with no carbon footprint, no cars, no fossil burning anything. And so it's kind of this experiment, can you build a zero carbon emitting city and have it function? And kind of the answer is, yeah, you can, but it costs a lot of money. And so in the central plaza in Masdar, the architects had designed this big empty plaza, and it's so hot there that like people avoid this plaza. So they came to me and they're like, we need some cool, cooling sculpture. And so I proposed this kind of tree-like form with all this. It's actually based on the gate of my workshop that I was mentioning. So this super responsive kind of leaves. And so the Masdar authorities, sent me an email today saying, what kind of noise is this thing going to make? Is this going to drive everyone crazy? And I said, when it's super windy, it does make some noise, but people expect something like that to make some sound when it's really windy. It's like you look at a tree, and you expect a rustling sound from the leaves, and it's a similar kind of sound. Other projects we've done, people were like, this can't make any noise, like the hospital facade, like there's all these, sick people in there and worried families, and like, we really cannot annoy them. So we had to totally prove to them that that was a completely silent design. So it's a spectrum, and some of the versions we've done, like the one in Santa Rosa, is totally silent. So yeah, it's a mixture.
Awesome. Let's see. There's also just a lot of comments. I just want to read some of them, and you probably haven't had a chance to read through them. But in my opinion, this is the most important public art I've ever seen. Even the parking garages and covering, so interesting and informative to all us inhabitants in our earthly environment. Kudos for all these brilliant ideas. Wonderful presentation. Can you show us a moving element in detail? Oh.
Not sure this will satisfy, but this is something we just finished like a week ago. This is in Sunnyvale. This is Google's new crazy huge campus in Sunnyvale. This is 100,000 pendulums, and so they're very thin, lightweight polycarbonate pendulums, all attached to huge cable nets that have been stretched across, again, a super ugly parking garage. Google hired like these super expensive, fancy architects to design their office building. And by the time the architects got to the parking garage, they had kind of run out of creative ideas. So they dumped it in my lap. And so the whole idea of this is each one of these pendulums is independently responds to the wind, but then you look at the whole facade and you can see all these waves and patterns. And so it's really the wind that imparts kind of a global pattern formation into the facade. And it was sort of a I don't know, kind of an artistic analogy to kind of Google's whole kind of platform, with the idea that, like, you know, there's millions of people using this system, which causes kind of large scale patterns to emerge that are not kind of inherent in the system itself. They're emergent properties, which is, you know, something I think about a lot.
Awesome. And by the way, Marguerite, you started saying, does burning up the garbage in, but it didn't finish. So if you want to finish your question, go ahead. Oh, and actually the same person, that was more of a comment. Nature and mankind, outer space, your inspiration. It blows me away. Thank you for illustrating elements to understand what is out there. Loved seeing the water vortex example of the birth of two stars. That was really cool. Somebody asked, have you received any inspiration from material science technological advancements in your work?
Well, you know, definitely materials. I mean, I'm always sort of scrounging industrial supply catalogs for kind of interesting, you know, things to experiment with. And but getting back to, I think what Marguerite was going to ask about is the new rules about, like, not leaving your junk up in space. You know, basically there's so much, you know, dead things up there circling the planet that, like, everyone's realized that it's dangerous. And so it's been unregulated, you know, all this time. So they're just now starting to make rules that basically say, like, you have to show us what your plan is before we'll let you put anything more up in orbit. You have to show us what you're going to do with this thing after, you know, you're done with it. And then and Momentus, this company that I've been working with, like, you know, they're out there launching, you know, 50 more satellites. But it's part of their business plan. They want to become kind of the cleanup people too. So they're going to go around, like, you know, sucking up all the broken, unused, or, you know, past their life satellites and other pieces of stuff up there, and then burning it all up on the way back down.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we actually are going to have another presentation just about that coming up in a few months with somebody who I saw her presentation elsewhere, but about that topic specifically, sort of the space junk and political, you know, regulations surrounding that now that it's being seen as a problem, obviously.
Well, and the movie Gravity really helped. The movie Gravity basically showed people, like, you know, this is what could happen, and it'd be a crazy mess.
Yeah. Somebody said, Ned, you are a national treasure. And then somebody shared a quote. So he said, thank you, Ned, for this inspiring, uplifting talk. Reminded me of a quotation: what is essential is invisible to the eye, from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Yeah. And how are we on time? Oh, we're just on time. And I don't want to take too much of your time, Ned. There's another. Oh, somebody asked, do you have a website for more information?
Yeah, my website, it's just my name, nedkahn.com. And yeah, you can see you know, a bunch of, I only showed you a small, you know, sampling. You know, we've completed 150 projects over the last 30 years. So all kinds of different things too, fog sculptures and fire sculptures and sand sculptures and lots of wind things. And yeah, so and that has my contact info on there if anyone has like further questions or reach out.
And I'll actually put that in the chat. And you said it was just nedkahn.com?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. I would love to see the picture when Momentus gets that back to you with the I forgot what you called it, but that picture, seeing the ring of the atmosphere would be fantastic. I would love, would love to be able to share that out. If you think,
well, the plan is to distribute it widely and freely. It's still in conversation, but Time Magazine was interested in featuring it somehow, but basically I said, let me get it first before you start getting anyone expectations up. And Momentus, it's all uncharted territory, and but Momentus sends up these crafts once or twice a year for the foreseeable future. So they basically said, this is kind of our prototyping. This will, maybe we'll get the amazing shot with this, but maybe we'll see kind of, that we need a better camera or a different camera or a different, distance from the Earth, or we'll learn a lot. That's so it really is, I don't know, the unknown is kind of exciting to me,
right. It would be amazing if at the first try it's exactly how you want it, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll definitely have to follow you and look at that. Also, just to answer, somebody asked, will this video of this presentation be available to share or for later viewing? It will be on our website, rfo.org. There's a speaker series page. I think it's under events or visit, maybe. I forget, I'm sorry, but there's a speaker series page, and on there is a link to a YouTube channel where I post all of our presentations. So give me a couple days, but I will upload it to that channel. And unless there are any other questions, I want to thank you again so much, Ned. This was just so amazing. And I hope you had a chance to see a lot of thank yous, a lot of in the comments. And I think everybody shares my sentiments about your amazing work. So thank you again so much.
Yeah, well, thank you all. Thank you all for spending the time.
All right. Good night, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you.